All right, well, let's get on with our program here. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage Senator Ron Wyden and Senator Jeff Merkley. Senator Wyden, our senior senator and chair of the Senate Finance Committee, helped to launch this summit in 2002 and has joined us every year since then. He also serves on the Energy and Natural Resources, Budget, and Intelligence Committees before being elected to the U.S. and, thank you for serving. And our second guest, before being elected to the U.S. Senate in 2009, Senator Merkley served in the Oregon legislature as a House Speaker. He serves on the Appropriations, Foreign Relations, Budget, and Environment and Public Works Committees. Thank you both for being here. Very much appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time. So let's get, they don't want to hear from me anymore, they want to hear from you. So Senator Wyden, Oregon Business Plan is focused on shared prosperity, encompassing jobs and the economy, education, workforce, and opportunities for all Oregonians. As you think about your work as a Finance Committee chair, how will it show up in the lives of a family, maybe in Medford, or a small business owner in Gresham?
Josh, thanks for doing this, and congratulations to the company. You're making us all proud to
Thank you.
see all those operations around the country. And you mentioned our history. I do have a political announcement to make. And it's something of a breach of protocol. Duncan Wise says we shouldn't be doing this. But there has been so much speculation and so much news coverage about my plans. I just think I have to finally set the record straight, and that is I have no intention of applying for the job of being general manager of the Portland Trail Blazers. So we're just setting that to rest. And let me just be serious for a minute, because what Joff is talking about is really the foundation of our job, what Senator Merkley and I talk about, is really bringing things home. And let me touch on really three areas that are so important. My Clean Energy for America bill is the linchpin of what is being considered right now for climate, and particularly setting aside the era of fossil fuels and having cleaner, greener, renewable power. And this legislation basically, in a sentence, sets the foundation for clean, domestic, low-carbon energy where we don't have to worry about OPEC. And what this is really all about, in a nutshell, is that we'd have a free market, competitive, tech-neutral system where the more you reduce carbon emissions, the greater your tax savings. We basically threw the tax code in the garbage can, and I think that's going to be an exciting thing to build on. Second area for families that you mentioned all across the state is health care costs. And the Finance Committee has jurisdiction over health care. I'm particularly focused on prescription drug costs. They're gobbling up everything in sight. You may have seen Medicare Part B went up 15%. Based on one new drug, the Alzheimer's drug, Aduhelm, which is coming in at around $56,000. So the bill that we have been moving ahead on, it's passed the House, now in the Senate, much of my work finally begins to allow for negotiation to hold down the price of medicine. The government could step in on cancer drugs and arthritis drugs, the most expensive ones. There is a cap on insurance payments and insulin. Thousands of Oregonians depend on insulin. This is a start. There is much, much more to do, but it's a start. And finally, housing. Housing policy is also tax policy. And in my DASH Act, decent, affordable, safe housing for everybody, we have a down payment for what's called the low-income housing tax credit. More units, been very popular with residents, also popular with those who construct it because there's less bureaucracy and red tape. And I'm looking forward to moving on to not just LIHTC, but MIHTC, middle income housing tax credits, because in Oregon, we got a lot of couples. You might have a firefighter and a nurse, and they can't even begin to dream of housing. So those would be three areas, the question of clean energy, healthcare costs, and housing, that really relate to what families are talking about in their kitchen and in their dinner tables at night.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Senator Merkley, you sit on the powerful Appropriations Committee. As you think about our agenda, how could Oregon look different in 2030 thanks to the new federal infrastructure and the rescue funds that are out there?
Joth, thank you. And first, congratulations on the IPO, the biggest IPO in Oregon history with Dutch Bros, so yeah. Well done. No, I was telling Joth that I was a kid in Roseburg, and our neighbors moved to Grants Pass, so we commuted back and forth. And I missed the whole opportunity to start a roadside coffee company. I don't know how I missed it. But what I didn't miss was the opportunity to use my role in appropriations to help drive through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's finally infrastructure, not just week, but infrastructure year in America after so much long waiting. And the estimates for what that might mean for Oregon are substantial. It means on the order of about $3.4 billion in terms of roads, another $250 million in terms of bridges, approximately $50 million in terms of charging stations, another significant, almost $100 million for clean water for underserved areas, clean water and wastewater. And I must say, when Senator Wyden and I tour our 36 counties each year and talk to people directly, hopefully in person again sometime soon, the thing we hear most from county commissioners and city mayors and councilmen is the need for revitalized clean water and wastewater infrastructure. So in every conceivable category, Oregon is going to look different. This is the biggest public works initiative since we built the federal highway system in the 1950s. There's other big issues that we hope to complete here shortly. The appropriation bills for fiscal year 2022 have not been done yet, so we're on a continuing resolution. All of those will build on that foundation, but in terms of the big surge of what will make things look so different, it's this bill, and another big piece of it was rural broadband. And we have got to have we've got to have broadband, high-speed broadband serving every house in Oregon by 2030.
Yes, we do. Thank you. Yes, we do. Senator Wyden, wildfires continue to pose a huge cost on our state. What do you think can be done to accelerate the thinning of federal forests and to protect our community health and restore a healthy forest ecosystem?
Josh, first we have to recognize these are not your grandfather's fires. They are bigger, they're hotter, they're more powerful, they leap over rivers, and they're just devastating. So we're going to have to take a very different approach. And in the infrastructure bill, what Senator Merkley and I both talked about, because tax and appropriations, these are the key kinds of areas, we set out some sort of central principles. The first is you can't have big league economic growth with little league infrastructure. So a big part of our infrastructure is preventing fires. Now, one of the areas that I've focused on the Energy Committee, Senator Manchin agreed to be my lead co-sponsor, is prescribed burns. Prescribed burns essentially mean that you go in there when it's a little cooler and you can have a controlled burn. And if you talk to people and sisters, the Forest Service people and others, they'll say the controlled burn that they had saved their town. So that's number one. The second area that I focused on is grid resiliency. I want to thank Maria Pope and a lot of the utilities that worked with me on that. We were able to get billions nationally for grid resiliency. Everybody here understands what it was like to be without power during the cold weather, in the storms and the like. What we're going to be able to do is take a lot of those power lines underground in the future, and I think that's going to be important. And third, I consider a big part of our infrastructure to be telehealth. I mean, Senator Merkley and I have been all in on this broadband effort. I was able to shoehorn telehealth coverage into the first coronavirus package as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. But folks, apropos of fire, you're going to have new kinds of communications in order to ensure, for example, that people can get health services during those kinds of critical times. And so telehealth has been a third part of our effort as it relates to the rural part of the state and the tools that we need to have to fight fire.
Thank you for that. As a mainly now a resident of Southern Oregon, I can't tell you how important all of those things are to the communities in Southern Oregon, so thank you for that. Senator Merkley, Oregon has a strong base of manufacturing companies. It's one of our highlights of today. Manufacturing workers earn higher wages. The income taxes they pay support public services in every corner of our state. What do you see as the greatest opportunities for growing the manufacturing sector in Oregon, and what do we need to do to create these opportunities?
Well, Joth, my perspectives on this come from a couple of years ago. I did a whole series of tours under the general title of Made in Oregon, and just visited manufacturers in every part of the state, from doors and windows in Klamath Falls to mass timber products, including cross-laminated timber down in Riddle, and mass plywood, to food product production, of course, chips. And it's exciting that Intel is going to be producing or cutting the ribbon on the new fab in February, so I'm looking forward to that. Intel keeps adding an incredible number of jobs and prosperity to our manufacturing sector. What I heard in virtually every location were two things. First, infrastructure. We need to be able to get our inputs delivered efficiently, and we need to have the ability to deliver it to market effectively with minimum time delays and so on and so forth. But the second thing was education. And so often folks would say, hey, we need more of our children coming up through high school to realize that manufacturing is a great job, as you just pointed out, and to learn the joy of making things. And it makes me go back to my middle school and high school, where I took shop class after shop class. Of course, my dad was a mechanic, and we had lots of tools in the garage, and we were always making things, and everybody in the neighborhood was making things. But today, kids are playing electronic games. And so if we're going to have them exposed to really this world, we need to restore the vision of shop classes. And then we need to proceed with career technical education. And one of the things that I'm really like that is in Build Back Better is an investment in every form of training for the manufacturing sector. We're talking about supporting the union apprenticeship programs, the community college training programs, the re-entry into the workforce programs, and retraining for folks who have seen the economy change and their job careers change. But I want to mention one other key piece of this, and this is daycare. Because we have a huge supply of workers who will help with manufacturing, who cannot afford to go to work while we don't have adequate, affordable daycare. And the Build Back Better bill has so much for children in it. The child tax credit, great. Preschool, wonderful. College, great. But daycare is an essential element. Every developed country has affordable daycare. It's time America has it as well to help people be able to go back to work, support their families.
Thank you for that. And again, in Grants Pass, we are in desperate need of child care services, and I really applaud you for that work. Thank you. Senator Wyden, shortly we're going to be hearing from Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger. We understand that the semiconductor sector is likely going to grow greatly in this next decade. What are you doing to promote growth of the industry, and what can we in Oregon do to expand our position in this critical sector?
Joth, just before we leave this question of families and domestic needs, and Senator Merkley said it very well, I want to describe what happened to me in a Fred Meyer recently. And my staff says those are taking the place of some of the town hall meetings over the last couple months, because Ron's always in a Fred Meyer somewhere and telling a story. A woman came up to me and said, "Ron, I'm so pleased about what you guys are doing, for roads and bridges and all these transportation systems. And then she looked up and she said, number one, I won't be able to get to the bridge unless I have childcare. So that's what this comes down to. And on the Finance Committee, you won't hear many Democrats use these words. I am a supply-sider on childcare. We need to increase more supply. And that means, incentives for the private sector. It means a broader role for the government. So just with respect to childcare, I am a supply-sider in my bones. We've got to increase the supply. The waiting lists are just too long. Let's talk now about advanced computer chips and what Joth was touching on. On the Finance Committee, we're trying to say, you can't fix anything in America without advanced computer chips. And last year has certainly shown how vulnerable, we are. The Senate is working on kind of two fronts. First is the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. This is competing with China. Senator Mike Crapo and I, he's the Republican who's the senior fellow, were able to add a committee on trade in essential supplies to ensure that the United States always has access to essentials. And there's also more than $50 billion for domestic research and development and production as well. And we're pushing the House of Representatives to work with us on this. And the way the bill got out of the Senate was Senator Crapo and I had that trade amendment to deal with supply chains, to deal with forced labor, and it got 91 votes. Now we've got to get the House to work with us to move it over the finish line. The other part of the CHIPS issue is the Bipartisan Fabs Act, which is the 25% tax credit for investments in semiconductors. I'm the lead sponsor of that. It has already passed the House, so it'll be in the Senate. So it's hard to keep track of all the lingo back in DC, but the relevant lingo is the CHIPS Act, hugely important to Intel and the future of our country, because we use chips for basically everything, from the time you get up in the morning till the time you go to bed, and the Fabs Act with the 25% investment tax credit. Those are the two components of our strategy. Finally, an announcement as well, a big opportunity. I was asked by the business community to create a blue ribbon task force for semiconductor expansion. PGE CEO Maria Pope has agreed to co-chair the task force with me. It's about engaging the private sector. Senator Merkley and I do all of this, together. So we'll be reaching out to all of you to help us recruit public-private sector players. We've talked to universities and community colleges about being involved in this in the workforce. So simply put, you have 100% of your United States senators this morning all in on the manufacturing agenda, particularly as it relates to advanced computer chips. 100% of your senators.
Thank you. All right, so as we bring this session to a close, and we think about the decade ahead, and a lot of our work has been looking ahead to 2030 and shared prosperity and all of the various agenda items that we put up there. But as you both think ahead to 2030, if you had your wishes and it was a perfect world, what three things would look different for you from today in 2030? Senator Merkley?
Well, first, the success of middle-class Oregonians. The success of a family is really built on healthcare, housing, education, and a good-paying job. And that good-paying job ties right into a successful business community. But when I came out of high school and was familiar with my parents' kind of great leap forward from the time of the Great Depression through my graduation in '74, I thought, think about what's going to happen in my lifetime on that same path. But instead, for middle-class America, it's been flat. And but we've had a recent uptick And if we do these investments in healthcare, housing, education, and good paying jobs that are in infrastructure and Build Back Better, I think we have a chance to start building an upward inclined plane for middle class America. So that's number one. The second is we need to electrify everything with renewable energy, completely rebuild our energy system. And Oregon can lead that effort across this nation, and America can lead that effort across the world. And finally, I want to see a world where the dial is turned down enormously on partisanship. You know, when I was Speaker of the House, I created bipartisan teamwork bills, and we did a whole series of things to have one conversation, not a polarized conversation. But we've really seen the challenge of social media and cable television in dividing Americans. And we need to build a lot of bridges because it does not make, a house divided against itself is not a stronger house. And we need to do a lot to bring together the conversation about the fundamentals that lifts up all Americans.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Jeff, I would just pick up on Jeff's last point. What has always made us special, which is the Oregon way. It's not about Democrats. It's not about Republicans. We've had politicians of both political parties, practice it. And it feels like we've gotten away from that. And what Senator Merkley and I are both talking about is finding new ways to unite the state. And to me, one of the best ways to do that is to find economic strategies that benefit every nook and cranny in Oregon. In other words, people have often talked about urban jobs and rural jobs. The kinds of technologies that we're interested in, we can use anywhere if we have a foundation like broadband. I'm looking at opportunities, particularly in terms of preventive health. I think Oregon has a chance to be a leader in the cybersecurity field. I am a member of the Intelligence Committee. My older child calls it the so-called Intelligence Committee. Biggest threat to America, folks, is cybersecurity. Biggest single threat to America is cybersecurity. And this is something where every part of Oregon can be part of making a difference so that we can be leaders in the field. And then finally, the Oregon way has always had a moral compass. And in this DASH Act that I've introduced, the Decent, Affordable, Safe Housing Act, we made a down payment in the housing portion of Build Back Better. I've set a goal of saying that every homeless child in America, can have a roof over their head and a floor under their feet in the next 5 years. Oregon can take the lead. We've got Margaret Salazar, our housing person who's been advising us, scores of community activists. We have an opportunity as part of the Oregon way to create economic connections that bring us together and to keep the kind of moral lead that Mark Hatfield, Tom McCall, Vera Katz, Democrat and Republican alike have been part of for years. And that has always been the foundation of the 22-year-old Business Summit. We're going to keep it going, and we're going to keep it growing. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Senators. Thank you. Thanks, Senator Merkley. Thanks for your time. Yeah.
Well done.